guys, welcome back to another episode of Nanny News. It's your host, Ashley, and you can follow us on all social media platforms at The Nanny News. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about the history behind being a nanny. If you don't recall, we did a part one of doing the history behind a nanny about a few weeks ago. And in this episode, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper to about what happened in the 1900s area era of being a nanny. You guys, there is so much history behind being a nanny that a lot of us don't know, and I can't share everything. Otherwise, this episode would be hours long. But I really, really advise you guys to kind of go in and just Google the history behind being a nanny and see all the different things that the nannies did and back in the day to now. So much has definitely changed, and we're gonna dive into it today a little bit deeper. We're gonna talk a lot about nannies that were in the India that would travel to Britain um, around the 1900s, and yeah. So let's get to it, y'all. So sit back, relax, and let's get to another juicy episode behind the history behind being a nanny. All right, guys. So let's dive into it. So, like we said, there we actually have a part one of behind being a nanny, the history behind being a nanny. We did this about a few weeks ago, and in that episode, we really talked about where the word nanny came from and kind of the Victorian era, which was very hard back in the day. That was the era where basically these older women were the nannies, and they would really solely take care of the child. And I mean take care of the child. The parents were not involved at all, pretty much, during that time. So we're going to fast forward a few years. The Victoria era kind of happened between 1830s to about the 1900s. And the era that we're going to be talking about is around the 1850s to the 1930s to the 1940s, pretty much the rest until the 2000s. So basically, we're going to start off with basically stating this first, that London, Britain, was the main source, was a very big area for the nannies. That is where a lot of nannies were born, where nannies were placed, where a lot of families were looking for nannies, because Britain had a lot of royalty, a lot of royal families, and a lot of these around the country, the countries around it had the same type of royalty and needed nannies. So this is where the traveling nanny kind of came into play. So these families would have homes. The families that lived in Britain would have these homes in Britain, but they would also have some homes that are in India. And they would go to India more in like the winter months to, get away kind of from the cold. And so with that being said, they would have nannies that lived in India that would take care of their kids while they were in India. And sometimes they would ask these nannies to travel back with them and be a nanny back with them in Britain. The nannies in India were called ayahs, and ayah was traveling ayahs was very, very big. It kind of started out in the 1850s. It says a lot of families are traveling back and forth, and between around 1869, that's when it really became a big deal, where families were literally traveling back and forth constantly in British and the Canadian nannies all the time. It says that there was an estimate between 400 to 100 to 100 to 140 yayas. I'm not yayas. I'm so sorry. Ayahs that were visiting Britain every year, which ayahs are nannies in India. That's what they call them in India, ayahs. So now what would happen with these women when they would get to Britain, to nanny for these families, and these families didn't need them anymore. So these, like I said, so these families would hire these women in India, then they would have them come over to the Britain area and raise their kids. But when they were done raising them, these ayahs were on their own to figure out what the heck to do. So this woman made this house. It was kind of like a refugee house for these nannies to be placed. And it was called the Ayah's home. And these nannies, there were over 200 different nannies that lived at this time. There were 30 different rooms in this house. These nannies would come in there if they didn't know how to get back home, if they didn't know how to find, they needed help finding placement, more money to, money to go back home, or they needed another family. And British families would go into this house and pick nannies out, like, oh, let's have you come to our house this weekend and see if you can, you like us. So this home was very, very big deal. And it's actually turned into a museum, they say, here in London area. And it's was one of, it's called the Yah homes. I'm gonna put some pictures in between so you guys can kind of see. But this home was just a home where all these Yahs was staying, and it was kind of like an exchange, an employment exchange, where these families would come in and find these nannies. And so this would go on for till it kind of ended in the 1940s, they said. The traveling back and forth to India to Britain was not as popular, and it was starting to go kind of die down. So the Yah home was kind of didn't close its doors, but it didn't need to house as many nannies as it was during the 1830s to around the 1900 area. So what happens? Another big thing that happened in this era was that the Norlands College, which is where we all kind of know where a lot of nannies in the London area will go to get their training to become a nanny, is at the Norland College, and that was founded in 1892. And that was huge in this era because that means that these nannies could be certified now, which means that they could be even more top notch in these households. So, like we said back in our last episode, we talked about how these households had different levels of servants. They would have a older nanny, then they would have a nanny that was underneath there. They would have a wet nurse, which would just come in and solely breastfeed them. They would have a Victorian, or an educator that would just come in and educate the kids and solely just focus on education. So they had different levels in these houses. And so now that these nannies that were going to the Norlands College were able to get certified and be trained, now they are up above all of the servants in the household. And so that was huge in this industry. And that is how we started getting our certifications. If it really wasn't for this college to open up in 1892, I don't know where we would be with our education and our trainings that we have now today. So I thought that was just really cool to kind of pinpoint that together, that if it wasn't for this Norland College to be founded in 1892, I have no idea what would happen with all of that, with all of our certifications. So it was founded in 1982. The way they dress was very, very important to them. They had uniforms, is what they call them, and they still have uniforms to this day. If you go to the Norlands page or their website, or you follow a Norland nanny, which you could tell the difference between one. And I'm not saying there's a difference by the way that their education or anything like that. It's just the way that they present themselves is maybe different than how us U.S. nannies present ourselves. Those nannies will come in brown long dresses. They will have hats. They will have look more professional than any of the buddy in the household. That way they stood out in these households, because like we said, there was a bunch of different people in this household, and these nannies were the top one, and they needed to stand out. So the uniform was a really big deal, and it changed throughout the years. It started out, at first there was no skirts or dresses. I think it was just kind of pants and a shirt, and then it moved on into a skirt, and then now it moved into a dress and into a hat. The colors kind of all stay the same. They've been brown throughout the whole time. But it's just really cool to kind of pinpoint all that together. If it wasn't for these nannies that did all this hard work for us, y'all, we would not be here where we are today. If it wasn't for these people to find these schools, these colleges, these trainings, these agencies, then our industry would not be the same as it was today. So I think it's just really cool to hear a little history behind being a nanny. Nannies didn't just start with just being live-in nannies, or live out nannies, or what we do now, which is a whole broad. Like, we got NCSs, we have live-in nannies, we have live out nannies, we have full-time nannies, we have we have part-time nannies, we have doulas, we have just tutors. Like, we have so much. And if it wasn't for these ladies, these women back in the day, to put in the work and to found these houses and these colleges, who knows where our industry would be today. So I'm going to link a lot of different articles in the comment section, and I advise you all to sit down and kind of read about them, read about the Ayah home, get a little bit more deeper into it, like what was the home for? Like, it was to house these nannies, but what, like, why? Like, we can dive deep more into this. I'm just not going to, for the sake of our time of our channel. But I want you guys to really look at these articles, because these articles are juicy, y'all. Like, the history behind Nanny is dope. Like, we really are some dope people. Like, and I'm not even trying to say that because I'm a nanny and I know I'm dope, but like, I'm saying, like, we are just like, the history behind it, and like the way we evolved is just been so crazy, and it's changing every single year. And if you haven't noticed, the past 2 years our industry has really changed, and has really changed over here in the United States. That's the crazy thing about it, is that it is a whole different life as a nanny on the outside of the United States. And that's kind of where nannying was on the outside of the States. Nannying wasn't brought to the States until probably in the 1900s, when it was really big then. But baby, London and Britain and India, Philippines, like, all those are big areas of where nannying first was brought and brought up. And so it's kind of cool to read about the different nannies and their different cultures that they went through back in the day to be where we are now. It's just mind-blowing to me. So please, y'all, like, go to the comment section and click on some of these links. I'm gonna post like 3 or 4, so you guys can really dive deep into the history behind being a nanny. I just wanted to touch a little bit about it. I'm going to probably go into more about it maybe here future on episodes. But I just wanted to kind of get it out there so people kind of know just a little bit about what it was like being a nanny back in the day and what it's like being now, because baby, we live in compared to what these nannies were doing back in the day. And so we got to give ourselves a lot of props from making this turning this industry into what it is today, which is a full-on career, that it is. So that's the episode for today. I'm gonna stop mingling and blobbling because I could probably talk and go on about this forever. Like I said, I just wanted to give you guys a little glimpse about the history behind being a nanny. Please check out the articles in the comments below. And if you guys did not watch our last episode on Wednesday, go do so. We sat down with Sue Downey, and she was able to announce where the Nanny Palooza is going to be next year. So please go turn into that. Like, y'all, like, if it wasn't for these nannies, like, we wouldn't even have Nanny Palooza. Like, that's what's so crazy to me. So, yeah. y'all, I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. And stay tuned for our next episode, which is going to be airing next Friday, unless we got something up our sleeves. You never know. But I hope you all have a blessed weekend, amazing week next week, and we will see you all on Friday for another juicy episode. Bye, guys.